Good morning. Hello, everyone. Welcome to this
Good
week's
morning.
edition of the SAP Fiori-side chat. We are very excited to have you join us today again. My name is Eugen Winschel from the SAP UX Product Management team, and I'm joined as usual by my co-host Keith. Good morning, Keith.
Good morning, everyone.
And today's topic for the Fiori-side chat is SAP Fiori 3. And to make it very interactive today again, we have invited a great round of experts for a panel discussion. That means great conversations and a real-time Q&A. We have with us Kara Stallone, Dina Glatzel, Robert Rabe, and Tom Rice. Welcome, everyone.
Thank you.
Hello.
Hi.
And to make it truly interactive, we invite all of you to ask questions and comment during the conversation. And before we get started, we wanted to set a few ground rules. Over to Keith for that.
Yeah, so hello, everyone. So as always in our Fiori-side chat, we try to keep things fun and lively and active. We really try to stay on focus most of the time. We're on SAP UX and UX topics. We promise we won't sell you anything, and we're not collecting any information to follow up with. We are part of a larger ecosystem, as is mentioned here. We ask you just to stay focused within the SAP tools and technologies, and try not to promote too many things outside of our topic. As you can see in your Zoom menu at the bottom there, if you're not familiar with it, there is both a Q&A and a chat button all the way at the bottom of your Zoom screen. Feel free to open up the chat, introduce yourself, and then if questions are coming up, feel free to open up the Q&A button and ask your questions there. We will try and answer them verbally. Sometimes we take a little delay just to get them organized. And finally, if you would like to be able to ask your questions verbally, please let us know. Go ahead, your video and microphone settings are at the bottom of your screen. Feel free to just go ahead and click on those and ask your questions verbally as we go. We are recording this, and we promise that if there's anything that you'd like to remove, we can do those things as well. But we want to make sure that we keep the conversations respectful and ongoing. And with that, I'd like to actually turn it over to each one of our panelists for today, probably starting with Dina, to go ahead and introduce yourself, and let's take it away.
Okay, so my name's Dina. I've been with Fiori since the very beginning. I started in development for SCM, and there we were one of the first teams adopting Fiori. And that is when I fell in love with Fiori and also UI5. And that's why I moved to lead parts of the design team that is designing Fiori about 5.5 years ago. And now
Great,
I'm there.
Thank you. Thank you, Dina. And Kara?
I'm a product designer with the SAP UX organization, and my relationship with Fiori began about 1.5 years ago, I guess, when we were, in the throes of tackling the UX consistency topic, and I led an initiative to bring in product illustrations to empty states throughout the Fiori experience.
Great, thank you, Kara. And that is not a virtual background behind you, correct?
No.
No, we're all jealous, and we'll be starting and hosting our chats when it's appropriate at your place. So Tom, without any further ado, our YouTube star, please go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hi, thanks. No, I'm a Fiori product manager, of course, focusing on innovations in particular. So, of course, Fiori 3 is a big topic at the moment. Been at SAP for quite a while now, since '93, and in the design space the last 6 years. Definitely fell in love, if you like, with. I've always been interested in user experience, and Fiori is a great opportunity for SAP to take the lead again with a great user experience. I'm really excited to be part of that journey now for the last 6 years.
Great, thank you, Tom. And certainly, last but not least, Robert, we're very thrilled that you joined us today. So please go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hey, I'm Robert, and I'm probably the one who does have a virtual background because I'm not standing on the street of Newport Beach of our new R&D location right now. I'm working with Fiori from a practitioner perspective because I'm part of the S4 HANA incubation team. That's a group in SAP's ERP development. And what we do is we build new products that address unmet business process challenges, and we do so with cloud-native technologies, which is precisely where Fiori 3 comes into play.
Terrific. Thank you and welcome, Robert. All right, Eugen, let's go ahead and turn it over to you to get things started.
Yeah, and before we actually get started, let me quickly launch a first poll And while we do this, just a quick reminder, we actually will give you some forward-looking statements and design concepts as well. So just for you to see that there is some material that you will actually see that is some lab previews. So just from a disclaimer perspective as well. Cool. And so while the poll is going, which is great to see that we have a lot of participants again. First question, maybe like, what is SAP Fiori 3 and what is new about it? Maybe Dina, you're the one that has been the longest together with Tom. Maybe the two of you take this question.
So in general, Fiori 3 it just builds on Fiori. It's the next evolutionary step of Fiori, where we try to address some issues that were there from the past, and also some things that changed with evolution over time, and try to combine that with trends that are coming up or that have come up in the past. And mostly this is why we usually say it's three things. It's consistent, it's integrated, and intelligence. That's that's basically our Fiori 3 direction. And I think maybe it makes sense if I quickly, can I show something?
Absolutely, yes.
Absolutely.
Okay, maybe I'll start with that, because then I can just give you an overview over the three parts. Okay, so the first part, that was a very important one, and we keep hearing it from our customers, is that with buying so many products in SAP over the past years, and then also, of course, there's a lot of different technologies, different design systems that were in place before. We need that feel that you're always in the same system and that you are always part of the SAP family. And with that, we introduced, as a first step for Fiori 3, we introduced a product standard consistency that focuses on the very basics of consistency. So color, theming, typography, you see it here, that you have the same shell bar no matter where you are in the system, no matter what product you're using. Colors, all different aspects of that, and also very a little bit deeper goes the action placement, so that you know when you're in the SAP system, the save button's always in the same place and it doesn't change. Same for the cancel and other buttons. So that is the icons, typography, terminology, that all of that feels like you're always using the same product. And that is, consistency is, when you ask customers, it's the first and foremost thing that they say is important to them. And it's both, it's consistency in terms of SAP products, but it's also staying consistent over time. So with that product standard, we're trying to get that permanent, that permanent part in all the products that will always remain, and that will almost be stable. The second part is, and that also comes again with a lot of different products and a lot of developments over the year, and that is the integration. Also, the second most mentioned thing by customers is that there needs to be more integration between the different products and between everything. And there are different levels of integration, of course, same as for consistency, but the very basic integration is that you know where you find all your stuff. So that's the most important thing. And this is, I don't know, those of you who are using the Launchpad or have seen a Launchpad, this is very busy already. And I actually have the same Launchpad because we also use it in SAP. And I always only use the search because it's very cluttered and it's too much information at the same time. So with even more products coming in, we're really running into even more data and more tiles and more of everything. So we really have to look at how do we make this consumable for a person looking at this. And this is a mix of, some of this is there already and some isn't. But what we want to do is we want to introduce a concept that we call spaces and domain-specific sites, so that you have depending on your role in the company, you have your maybe for example, I'm an employee, and then I'm a manager, and then somehow I'm a designer, and I maybe have different areas that I look at. I maybe have some analytical reporting, that I have those spaces in the Launchpad, that not everything is on one page, so I don't even know what I'm looking at anymore, but that you spread it out across those spaces. And within the spaces, we then have different pages and different sites. I think Tom will maybe show a little bit more of that. We go in iterations. So in the first iteration, we will move to splitting it across tabs, so that it gets spread out and you can include more information. And then if you're in your mindset, you're, for example, I don't know, in your manager role, you go into the manager part of your Launchpad. And then if you're in analytics and reporting, you go into that part. Or I don't know, if you're a sales person, you go into sales. And that's the primary idea behind that. And then over time, so at this point, we'll start with spreading the tiles, and in the next step, we start adding more visual information to those spaces, because spreading it out again gives us some rooms so we can add important data that maybe helps you understand it directly, what you want to look at, give you visual clues, maybe some charts, lists, first sneak peeks at your to-dos. There's different things that you can think of. And the last part is intelligence, where we try to look a little bit forward more, and looked at how maybe we can support our users and customers better to grow and make faster decisions, and utilize the intelligence that comes with new technologies. And there we have a whole palette of options. Maybe we can later look at some of it. And the description of all of this is also, we have it in the Fiori design guidelines, which is also online. So there's details all over the place of how all of the different intelligent design patterns work.
Great, thank you, Dina. So I'm very interested in hearing a little bit more about these future design patterns. I actually wanted to turn it over to Tom here for a few moments to maybe speak from a technology perspective. What's real now, what's real at today that you can kind of highlight?
Yeah, sure. I mean, the good news is we came up with Fiori 3 first steps actually last August, and we've continuously evolved this, and there's already quite a lot in the product. And I would say we have two aspects that I want to mention. One is actually, of course, our flagship, the digital core, S/4HANA, has a lot of Fiori 3, also utilizing, of course, the technologies, SAP UI5. But we also invested in fundamentals and technologies to help our cloud products, who often have, of course, their own technologies to help them also achieve this consistency. So, yeah, maybe I'll just start with having a look. Maybe I can share just 1 or 2 slides just to give you an idea of consistency and what we've achieved so far. So let me just find the share button. Oh, there we go. Share my screen. And yeah, so basically this slide simply shows, I mean, Dina mentioned, of course, is what we're standardizing on consistency. One aspect, of course, is the colors and the theme. So we've got Quartz Light as the one that we're standardizing across all our various products, with Quartz Dark to follow. And I can show you a little bit later if you have time, also a little demo in the system. And what we've done, of course, in the past, products from SAP had even different shell header bars. Probably the only consistent part was SAP. And like Dina mentioned, we're standardizing here and now on this Fiori 3 design, where we have this standardized shell header bar and this the standardized theme. And like I mentioned, what we've done from a technology point of view is put this into SAP UI5. So basically, if you're on the newer versions of UI5, or if you're on even the business suite, if you go to front-end server 6, you get this Quartz theme and the shell header bar. So from a technology point of view, you get that. But also the cloud units, they've been adapting this as well with their technologies, partly using also fundamentals, or what's coming also and partly available is the web components from UI5 that allow you to reuse things. And here we have some examples. So here on the left, you see consistency across different S/4HANA apps. But here you see now Sales Cloud, Marketing Cloud, Commerce Cloud, also with the shell header and the theme applied, so the same visual design. And of course, there's still more to come, of course, step by step, making sure the action's in the right place, like Dina said, and so on. But already you see here in the product, we already have some aspects covered there. I could also, I mean, before I can show you demos of spaces and so on, but maybe before I do that, I'll maybe just stop sharing. And I don't know if maybe there are some questions in the chat, and we've got quite a few minutes to go, so I don't want to spend all my time presenting and so on.
Well, so Luis Torres actually had a question here. It said regarding the new structure and space in this page and section tiles in Fiori 3, are groups in the Launchpad being replaced by sections now? Is that the intent?
Yeah, it's well, you could say that, but it's a different approach because yeah, visually it looks very much the same. So what we had before as groups are kind of like sections, but we now have, of course, the possibility to have multiple pages. So I guess I will come to let me just show you that actually, and show you in the system as well. So I'll just share my screen to show a bit of explanation, and then I can show you what it looks like. Let me again share here. So if you can see this now, this is explaining the new spaces, and this is actually available since last week, Thursday. So it's just come out with S/4HANA 2005, and published a blog on it also if you're interested, so you can read up there. So basically, before what we used to have was just a home page, one long page with different sections, right? And now we have, so the only way of structuring the actual content on the page was by section. So you just had one level of structure of the section. Now, actually, we have 3 levels. So you can actually have multiple spaces, so which you see along here. With this very first step, a space can only have 1 page, but we're planning, of course, to allow multiple pages for a space. So the pages, the multiple spaces is 1 level. And then within each of these pages, you can have then here sections, which is like the groups before. So before you had 1 level, now you have 2. And of course, when we have potentially multiple pages per space, we'll have 3 levels of being able to group the content. So that's definitely an improvement there. And yeah, maybe just to see it in action, let me just find the right demo. Yeah, so here we see, for example, a system that's just been upgraded onto 2005. So you see here the various, these are actually different spaces now. Each space has a page. So this is different pages, and as you can see, each page has then these different sections. And of course, you can, like Dina said, obviously still find all your apps by searching, for example, or using the app finder, or of course using the menu here, which is also a new feature with Fiori 3. And perhaps, like I mentioned, that we're planning, of course, to have also more than 1 page, and I can even give you a little sneak preview if I find the right screen. So here we actually have a development system, a test system from our development landscape. So here you see we have multiple spaces again, and here's an example of what it would look like. This general ledger space has got a number of different pages. And so here, I mean, if I click on the main one, that takes me to the main general ledger, if you like, the overview, but I can also go to these other pages here using the menu. So that's a kind of sneak preview there.
So Tom, quick question. So you mentioned just like it's 2005. What about S/4HANA on-prem?
Yeah, so with we're planning to also provide it then with the next S/4HANA on-premise release, we're now naming the new naming convention for the on-premise releases as we use the year. So it'll be the 2020 release, and next year would be the 2021 release. So that's planned, yeah, in the autumn basically. Probably around the October timeframe, but we would have it included there, and there also with the possibility to have multiple pages per space already. So that's something we're hoping that'll come with the 28 cloud release, and then also with the on-premise release. Yeah.
So you mentioned multiple pages. How many can we have?
Well, it's pretty much unlimited. I mean, I think the limit is obviously what makes sense from a customer point of view. I mean, you don't want to overload the user. And what's also important is, and people sometimes forget this, our advice is don't put all the tiles on the home page, or of course now with the multiple pages, don't put all the tiles there that you have. put the ones there that you frequently use, because you can still, using search or using the app finder, find all the tiles that are available to you. So those you don't use very often, you can just hide away, you know, if you like, in the menu, and you just have the stuff you frequently use on these pages. And that, of course, also will reduce the if you like, the overload of having so many different tiles.
Then the next question from the chat that said, like, will the CFLP and the SCP include these spaces as well in the near future?
That's certainly the plan, certainly. So maybe for those who don't know what the CFLP, but basically we've been talking for quite a long time about having a single entry point, and Dina mentioned it, you know, the integration, being able to access all the various products we have. And here we're planning to provide the Fiori Launchpad in the cloud on the SAP Cloud Platform. And so people have often been calling that, you know, the central Fiori Launchpad, the CFLP. Yeah, the central entry point. And we're certainly planning when that comes out, that'll be supporting the spaces concept, of course. Yes, definitely.
Great. And then there's like one more about the concept. Is it available for SAP Cloud Platform Service in Neo and Cloud Foundry?
It's planned for Cloud Foundry, and certainly the products at SAP, we're also building application products on SCP. They will also be using the spaces and pages going forward. So we have that kind of consistency there. And also when we have that kind of central entry point, we'll have, of course, that integration there between, let's say, SAP S/4HANA and also the applications that are built on SCP. So there we have that kind of integration. That would be the first step. And of course, then going forward, we hope that the cloud units will step by step also start providing their content in there.
What about Neo?
Well, Neo, we're focusing on Cloud Foundry.
Okay.
That's kind of the future there, definitely.
Okay. Coming back to S/4HANA on-prem.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead. Finish the question.
On-prem, will the customers be able to create their own pages as well? Or is it just us from SAP who can do that?
Oh, definitely, definitely. And in fact, we're starting off with S/4HANA, we're actually shipping templates. So when customers get this, and this is also important, we're not like switching off that old home and suddenly confronting you with the new spaces. It's going to run in parallel. So there's a kind of switch, so that in the cloud, at least for half a year, we're expecting it as a minimum, that you can have both next to each other. Probably on premise would be longer because obviously you have longer upgrade cycles there. And basically, we're going to be shipping kind of templates, so a page or a space per role, per business role. And customers can take those templates and either use it one-on-one or, of course, adapt it to their needs. To start with, it'll just be admins who can do that. So admins will set up the pages and spaces for the various roles that users have. But going forward, of course, the idea is that even users can even personalize with their own pages. So users right from the beginning can personalize, like today, with their own sections and, you know, hide tiles and move tiles and all this kind of stuff within a page, but they, for the moment, can't create their own pages. But of course, going forward, we want to let users do that as well, definitely.
Great. So
from a design side, that's the absolute, that's what we want. We want to give the end user the power to actually build their own page. That's our super goal. The design super goal.
So yeah, speaking of design, I'll give Tom a breath here a little bit. So there's obviously a lot of orchestration behind the scenes here to conceptualize, you know, what's next in Fiori 3, and even from a tooling and support perspective, you know, how do we roll out these concepts to teams, to people who are implementing? Maybe Kara, maybe you could speak to what you do, with Fiori 3 to try and enable Fiori 3 design concepts across, landscapes maybe outside of UI5.
Right. So I work with a team that creates fundamental libraries. I don't know if anyone on the call has heard of it, but it's an open source project with the goal to aid consistency across SAP product teams that build products through non-UI5 UI frameworks such as Angular, React, and Vue. We are ensuring for this whole consistency product standard that we are aligned closely with the SAP UX org, our Dina and my org, and everything that we do is Fiori 3 compliant, following the Fiori guidelines and the specifications. So what it does is offers a centralized set of libraries that cover the most common UI components, patterns, and layouts of Fiori 3.
So Robert, are you one of the people who might be considered a consumer for what Kara creates, or how do you, how do you adopt?
Precisely right. I'm the one who's opening all the tickets once we need help. So what we do is exactly as Kara just said. We are, as I mentioned earlier, we're an incubation team. So one of the things we do is we're looking at experimenting with technology while building products, right? And one of the things we do is, for example, we build our front ends with React from a technology perspective, leveraging the fundamentals library that Kara has just talked about. And one of the things that we found particularly great is that the reaction and load times that React offers are truly fantastic, even especially with the machine learning scenarios that we're leveraging. And what is also important is, and Dina, you mentioned this, right? Like mass customization is the goal. What we are offering with the cards concept or leveraging the cards concept is that depending if you're an administrator logging on, or if you're a analyst, business analyst logging on, you will see different sets of information on your home screen, which then offers you a jump-off point to different positions in the business process, depending on what you're dealing with. And this is really important because Fiori 3 really gives us the ability to do that, and we couldn't have done this type of mass customization previously. And actually, one more thing that is important is with Fiori fundamentals, the atomic elements, right? So what we see in the colors, the shapes, the fonts, and all of these things are so well defined that even when a specific component for the business processes that we leverage, they're really industry specific. So we sometimes need something custom, right? The atomic elements, when they're not there, when we want to build new custom componentry, we really can do that in an easy way because the individual elements are so well defined. And then, nice thing about open source, we can feed it back into the fundamentals library, which then becomes available for our teams inside and outside of SAP, right? Which is the whole point of open source.
That's great. So, I mean, Kara, that's some great validation for you to see that the system is at work, right? So that's fantastic. Are there any particular challenges to adopting these concepts? As they're presented? I mean, are they? Do you find when you say open tickets, what type of issues do you typically run into? What are the challenges that have to be overcome that go back to design, perhaps?
Right. So one of the things that we're finding is that at the moment, the industry-specific componentry that is available in Fiori is sometimes not yet there, but this is then where the power of open source comes in to solve for that, really, right? So this is where I said, like, the solution, which is it's easy to build custom componentry, is really close together with the problem in a sense, because it is easy for us to build these sorts of additional component. So when I said tickets, I was joking halfway. Yeah.
I think it's I think it's always fascinating to see how a design system evolves over time, right? And so it's great to actually see that this this is building up here. I mean, so many of us are so UI5 centric, don't actually realize and appreciate the resources that are available and how they're used to kind of scale out for people who are not using non-UI5 technologies. So thank you for that. I wanted to kind of throw it back here maybe briefly to Tom. So we saw a little bit about spaces here. So if we were at Sapphire this year, we would have seen probably spaces demoed. Are there any other one or two major highlights that you would call out as part of this Fiori 3, the latest Fiori 3 announcement? And maybe you want to shill your blog there, maybe put a link into the chat for people who might be interested.
Yeah, I mean, I can do that. Julia's going to put it in the let me just all panelists and then team. So I'll paste the blog in. That's just the link to the blog if you're interested. Yeah, I mean, of course, like I mentioned, we're kind of introducing Fiori 3 step by step. So it's not like there'd be one huge, big, amazing thing that you're missing out by not, traveling to Sapphire. But we would, of course, be showing the spaces like I showed you. What we have been doing also is step by step providing more intelligence, and it's already partly in the product. So we'd be showing some aspects there. And yeah, I mean, if you like, there are two aspects that I could highlight, perhaps. One of them, I mean, Dina mentioned both of them. One of them is sort of explanations, because as we have more and more machine intelligence in the system, it can get scary. If a user doesn't trust the system, then you're really lost, right? So, and of course, if the system's starting to make recommendations for you, calculating stuff, and I mean, worst case is you're following what the system's doing, and then your boss says, "Hey, what have you been doing, you crazy guy?" Right? So you want to feel, confident that the system is really actually making suggestions that make sense for you to follow. So we have there in Fiori 3 a design pattern for how to explain this kind of stuff. And let me maybe show you a live demo here. Just got to find the right screen. This is the one I want, sorry. So yeah, I wanted to show monitor materials without purchase contract. So basically, as a user, I'm a purchaser. And this app here, basically, if you're procuring stuff, you can often save money if you negotiate a contract with a supplier, because you're promising to buy a lot of stuff, so he's going to give you a better price. And the system here is basically showing you all the materials that you're ordering. Here's the sort of the total amount you've been spending, so 140K here, and the number of items. And so it's obviously that the top right here, you're spending a lot and you have a lot of purchase items. These are ones that you'd think should be covered by contracts. And you see here in this case, the green ones are the where contracts already exist, but the blue ones are those where the system is proposing, and the orange ones are not proposed. So we have machine intelligence here, where it's explaining or making suggestions. And the thing is, it's not just these two dimensions. So there are actually quite a few other criteria. I mean, maybe you ordered a lot in the past, but it's not relevant anymore. And so here you see the actual ranking of these various materials, and the explanation part comes in just by clicking on it. So if I click here, for example, you see the total gross amount and the number of items. So these are the two main dimensions that you see visualized, but you have other aspects as well, like days between the first and the last order. So how often are you doing it, or days since the last order? So if you haven't been ordering it very often or very recently, maybe it's not so relevant anymore. And so here you have that kind of an explanation that helps the user understand why is that being calculated. And that's part of the Fiori 3 concept. And as you can see, we already have that in S/4HANA in this place here. So that's one thing that we'd be showing, of course. And perhaps another thing is the situations concept. I mean, I don't know, Dina, do you want to say something on that first, or should I kind of just give a brief explanation, show a brief demo?
I think you can maybe start directly. Sometimes it's easier to understand when you see it.
Okay, sure. So in this case, the demos are always a little bit difficult to set up. So what I've got is actually a recording here. So basically, the idea behind one of the big concepts actually that we have in Fiori 3 is situation handling for intelligence. So a business situation is something that happens not so often, hopefully, but it's obviously something that you need to deal with. So it's not like a truck arriving every day, hopefully, or many trucks arriving with deliveries and so on. That's obviously something that should be day to day, and you have maybe a normal work list to deal with, or what have you. But a business situation is something that's a bit more out of the ordinary, or particularly critical. And situation handling is a kind of approach for dealing with that, where basically you get notified that there's an issue, and then you can, the system actually helps you deal with it. And so let's just show an example here also in procurement, where basically a supplier is going to inform me that although he promised to deliver a certain amount, he's not going to be able to deliver it after all. And obviously you have to react, you have to get the materials for production from somewhere else then. So basically you get a notification. So here in Fiori 3 we have these notifications. You can see I already have quite a few. And here we have the quantity deficit in supplier's delivery. And so basically based on this confirmation, and I can click on the notification here and go directly now into this situation description. So I'm looking at the purchase order item, but it's a special view here explaining the situation. So I have a brief explanation of the situation. And I can see down here, I've got the actual details. So there's a quantity deficit of 50 pieces and it's due in 7 days. So I've got 7 days to get the stuff for production. I can see the details on the supplier. And here you see the system is actually making a proposal. It's giving me alternative suppliers, and you can even see the last purchase order I had there. And I can just click on one of them and then basically create the purchase order from that supplier. So, you know, in the past, you'd maybe have that notification from the supplier, but you'd have to search all over the place to find a solution. Here you have everything all on, you know, given to you on the plate, if you like. So you've got the information about the situation, you've got the relevant information, and also these alternative suppliers are directly given to you. And what's new here also in this release is you can even switch here between this kind of specific situation view and the general view of the purchase order item. So here you see here you can kind of unselect hide details if you like, and then you see the full information on the purchase order item. So this is, for those who haven't seen it before, this is a Fiori object page, basically with the various facets there, and you can always switch between showing everything and just showing the situation details.
So you guys all have contact with customers. You've shown us some cool stuff, some great stuff, great ideas, great new design concepts. What's the feedback from the customer side on that?
They love it. they want more. I mean,
hopefully, because we really tried to,
yeah.
we didn't come up with this in our head just by ourselves. So the goal of Fiori 3 was really to build on the feedback that we had and to not just do something that we make up. And that's also why Fiori 3 is not just one big bang. It's not one thing that comes and then it's there, but it's this iterative process of, we want to be consistent, we want to be intelligent, and I think we'll work on that for a longer time. It's not just a one-time thing and then we're done with it, but we continue to come up with concepts, we change, we validate, we get feedback, we change again. But I think the general direction of where we're going, that we're going towards consistency, towards integration, towards intelligent, the feedback is really, really good also on the first approach that we're taking.
So as a follow-up for that, I mean, what formal processes of feedback are they? I mean, does Fiori still have CEIs around the design system? Are they specific, customer engagements that occur where feedback comes in saying, you know, this particular area I'd like to see improved, or I'd like to see more innovation in a different area? What are those things? Do those things exist?
Oh, there's a mix, I think. There's a little bit of everything. We have some CEIs running. Today, for example, I saw the results of a CEI on message handling, and they really did deep dives on how is it working, what's not working. Then we have, for the whole integration part with the Launchpad and how everything works and the spaces, we had a really long going CEI for, I think, 2 years. Where we got all the first ideas for this. Then we do a lot of, we were doing a lot of testing at, for example, conferences and customer sites, which we can't right now. So we are moving on to remote usability testing and remote research, which is also a good option and a very valid one. And then we have some customer groups that we continuously work with also to get that higher level feedback of what are the issues. We're starting to integrate Qualtrics better so that we get some feedback from there. There's all kinds of different channels that we use.
Okay. So
yeah, and maybe
go ahead.
And maybe in addition, right, what we are hearing, because if you're out there and you're working in a software house and you're building extensions or the like, right, like from like what I'm doing in my day-to-day is a little bit similar, building complementary applications, additional use cases. What we're really hearing from our customers is that the flexibility that Fiori brings allows that consistency that we have discussed here so much, right? It's not a stubborn framework that doesn't allow for adaptation, but rather, and especially with fundamentals, especially with Fiori 3 on the UI5 side, these adaptations really become possible, and that's only going to become bigger through these open libraries that we're seeing. So that's really working out just from the other side who's leveraging Fiori on the day-to-day.
So Fiori doesn't Fiori isn't just a set of building blocks, right? You are able to innovate from there, right? You are able to kind of extend. So, I mean, when you're creating new things from this, Robert, you know, do you still, as you know, as a development, as building applications, do you still engage design thinking processes through here? Can you apply Fiori 3 then to what you discover? Is that the approach?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So what we literally go through a design thinking journey. We do business process mapping typically. So we look at how is the business process done today. And this is typically oftentimes business processes that are unaddressed. So oftentimes things get done like the same way they've been done since the 90s or something. And then really Fiori comes in at the later stage when we start to take something into the low fidelity and mid fidelity prototyping phase, where actually we are leveraging in a collaborative design tool, which I'm not going to mention because of non-advertising, and where we're leveraging the Fiori libraries before even starting to code. And then because that tool spits out CSS, it's really easy to go to functional front-end code. So that migration from mid-fidelity clickable prototypes that don't have real code behind them, right? So low code frameworks, and going to higher code, the real business logic that's connected to the backend is really much easier there. And that's also one of the benefits, and not going too deep into that to not get too technical, but that's one of the main benefits that we've been seeing with fundamentals and React on that side, because especially when you look at, say, ML scenarios, right? They're, you know, React coming out of the Facebook realm, they have billions and billions of users and clicks and interactions. So there is a large community and a large pull behind it to allow those or enable those kinds of use cases.
Yeah. So Kara, this is probably a good time if you want to actually if you have a link to the repository, you know, the open source, that'd be good to throw into the chat. We're getting close to our last segment here, so I wanted to actually throw this back to Tom to perhaps answer some of the more technical questions that have come up through the Q&A, particularly
I'll do my best.
Yeah, well, the first one here is really about when can we expect the new Fiori functionality in S/4HANA aside from the theming and the shell, right? Inevitably, people are always saying, you know, that's great, I want it now. You know, how do they find out when it's happening? What's happening? What's the process for people to get more information?
Well, the best way is to have a look at the roadmaps that we have. So Fiori roadmap, for example, you can find on sap.com/Fiori, /roadmaps. And you'd find it also on the /Fiori, but a bit more indirect that way. But of course, if you give in directly sap.com/roadmaps, search for Fiori, then you can find the Fiori roadmap. The actual application coverage is in innovation discovery. So if you can search there, if you know the name of a role or just, you know, part of the name, like accounts payable, or like expert, or sales, you can then find the various innovations that are planned in that area. Yeah, like I said, I mean, the applications are step-by-step picking up on these innovations. So I show you an example in procurement. I mean, sales also have, of course, I mean, one from a while back now are the overview pages. If we have quite a few overview pages, for example, situations is gaining traction, definitely. And of course, obviously, well, spaces and pages is something, it's not just the shell, because of course the application teams are now making the effort of defining these templates that make most sense from a user perspective for that given role. So we're investing in the content there as well. So yeah, basically with every release, if you like, there's more coming.
A little bit more coming. So a couple more questions is one that we might want to just acknowledge and save for another time is the digital work zone, the eventual next phase of the Launchpad on the cloud platform. Will the Fiori 3 Launchpad design be included in the digital work zone? And I think we might as well speak to the elephant in the room by answering that question.
Yes, so certainly. So, but I mean, basically, if you think about it, the Launchpad, as we extend it now with spaces and pages, becomes more and more flexible. And we're also planning, it's a bit further on the horizon, to pep it up with also having more richer information like cards. So Robert already mentioned it. Of course, you can play around a little bit, but you know, providing that for S/4HANA, we have to be very careful. The more information you put on the pages, the more, of course, you know, when people log on in the morning, they could be kind of killing the back-end system if we do it wrong. So we have to be careful there, how to do that. So of course, the Fiori Launchpad will become more and more flexible that way. And yes, it'll be integrated in SAP WorkZone. So if you like, you can have the Launchpad in the cloud as your central entry point. That's a very structured way of approaching your applications. Yeah, so you've got the, you know, the spaces, the pages, the sections. You can, you know, access all your applications that way. Whereas WorkZone is more like, you could say kind of like a portal in the sense of you've got much more freedom on the kind of content you want to put there. You can have cards there as well. Either cards, of course, also coming from a business system, but of course also cards from anywhere, basically. From you know, legacy cards from that you've, well, when I say legacy, I mean that you've built yourself, I should say, custom cards, or coming from you know, email systems, calendar, what have you, and of course also the possibility for collaboration and for putting other kinds of content there, videos, you know, how-to guides, all this kind of stuff. So it's much more freestyle, I would say. And the idea is that if you're in WorkZone, you could say that is a kind of has everything, if you like. So if you're in WorkZone, you can also click on a tab or and actually come to the Launchpad. So you could either, as a customer, just have the central Launchpad, the central entry point, and give your users that as a structured access to their, you know, the work that they need to do, or you could have the whole, you know, the WorkZone with all the other aspects as well.
And we'll cover WorkZone more completely in future conversations for those people who are not quite familiar with the solution. So, Eugen, do you want to take over?
Yeah, so I had a question towards like Kara and Robert. So I think we know quite well of how to develop Fiori applications for UI5 and with UI5. Do you guys have any recommendations, any resources, people to follow on how to develop Fiori beyond UI5?
Right. Well, I posted the link in the chat to the fundamental libraries. And I guess the thing to note is that fundamentals right now consists of 4 libraries. And the fundamental styles is where the Fiori themable components are built in CSS and HTML, I think, as Robert had discussed. And those then are then rolled into each of those framework components. So the team is primarily in Montreal, and they release new components every 2 to 3 weeks, starting off with the fundamental libraries, which is the front end presentation layer, and then roll them into those particular UI frameworks. And that usually follow like a sprint behind. So I would take a look at the libraries, see what's there. We also, to support designers, we've also created a UI kit, which is pixel aligned, that represents everything that is currently in the system. So right now we have about 40 components that we plan to roll out more and more over the next couple months. Hoping to double that shortly.
And perhaps one thing to mention also is the UI5 web components, which is also, I think, also a good way of, even if you're developing outside of UI5, you can still leverage the web components for individual things like a date picker, you know, which you get the calendar and everything. Yeah. And these, what's always, I think, important to mention also with UI5, and of course it applies also to the web components, is that they already support accessibility. And if anyone's done, you know, web development, actually getting accessibility support is often quite a lot of extra work that you don't kind of think about when you start out. So it's of course good to be able to have these reusable components that are already provide that out of the box.
Robert, maybe towards you, like I know that you guys have done a lot with your team on React. Is there anything you guys are able to share for the wider community?
Yeah, so number one, we use the exact libraries and the exact resources that Kara had mentioned, right? So it's not even like we inside SAP have a special secret sauce or special secret resources or something like that we're leveraging, or a red telephone or something like that.
I thought you guys.
It's this great call now function in in a conferencing tool of your choice. So no, we use the exact same libraries, and then maybe one thing that we can do is, after this, if there is interest, is we can maybe put up a blog that describes a little bit about what our experience with fundamentals has been, because again, what we've been seeing is that there has been more of a pull in the direction of these technologies. So hearing it from our perspective on what our experience has been might be of interest. Again, one of the main admitted open flanks right now is, and what Thomas said with accessibility is definitely a right one. Yeah, that is something that isn't there right now. But one of the other ones is that there's not as much componentry readily built in fundamentals at this point as it is, for example, in UI5, right? So this is where A, little bit of catch up has to be played, and B, then, the additional, componentry that might not exist in Fiori 3 altogether can be built, right? So in general, my experience has been, right, so if you're, let's say, building an extension or something, and you're having a use case that is really unorthodox and where the componentry might not be there yet altogether in no Fiori free design system whatsoever, then fundamentals is making your life really easy. If you're doing something where, say, in UI5 everything is already there, it might be the best option to go with that approach, because there you get the accessibility, you get the readily built components already out of the box, right? So it really depends on how almost standard your use case is that you're building for. That can be an important driver for the technology choice that you're going for, just from a pure feasibility perspective, right? Because then if you're doing something that's unorthodox for SAP, it might not be unorthodox for the overall React, i.e. community. Say if you're having something that comes more from the consumer space or the social network space where the Facebooks and the like come into play, right? Then you can benefit from that. So it really depends on what ecosystem and what universe are you working in a little bit.
I mean, I think that's an important thing to mention maybe at the end of the handover to Dina almost is Fiori is a design system. And this is something, took me a while to understand what that really means, especially if you come from, it's like, I remember, I think Keith, you mentioned a customer was asking, what database does that system run on? Yeah. So it's not like an S4 system or a SCM system. It's a system in the sense of scale, allowing design to scale across different languages, across, mobile and web, and of course also not just UI5, but also, give guidance for other technologies. So I don't know, Dina, maybe you want to say a few words on the design system, the power of that.
I would actually, I'm trying to see if I can find it really quick, because then I could show you what makes it a design system and why it's so, because it's a whole system. It consists of languages, and Fiori for web, what we're discussing right now is just one of them, but it also addresses the mobile space, the native mobile space, and then also goes into the into the direction of conversational UI. And the guidelines that I posted, that holds all the different languages and the guidelines that we have for all the different languages. But so
while you're looking for that, I know that Keith has actually prepared a survey in Mentimeter. Keith, do you want to quickly share that?
I'd love to, if you'd allow me to actually share my screen. I'm just a mere attendee, which is okay. Yeah, people can actually see in the link in the chat. You can actually open that link and already start preparing things while we get the technology bits going here. But there is, we are interested in what Fiori 3 topics you'd like to cover, to go a little bit, more in depth. But in the meantime, maybe we could finish answering the questions, and Eugen, and I think it's because I'm not actually a presenter here in this case. But in the meantime, I think first and foremost,
there are some questions. Yeah. So while you're talking, there are some, just checking the Q&A, and there's some questions there around how do you administer spaces. Well, there's basically a new tool for that, a new app, Manage Spaces, that the Launchpad is developing, which is much more WYSIWYG, much easier to use. Yeah, will it be similar to creating catalogs, groups, tiles? It'll be similar but easier, basically. The authorization concept continues. We're actually working on improving the authorization handling. The whole setup of Fiori for S/4HANA, where we have the rapid activation and the content manager. We're also working on making the authorization mapping easier. So hopefully that answers at least some of those questions there. So Keith, can you present now? I see that. Yes, I see it. Yes, yeah, I see the Mentimeter.
Yeah, so feel free to either use the link that was in the chat or go ahead to the website here and enter the code. Are there other questions there, Eugen, that we could see that we might be able to cover in the last few minutes here?
I think from the conversations, first of all, everybody, thank you very much for joining today to the panelists. It was a great conversation. I think it was a great mix between design and technology, and I think we had seen a lot of questions, especially on the implementation side, on the technology side. So we might actually have a follow-up session, in particular on Fiori 3 and how the technology side looks on that. So Tom, you might be back very soon.
With some other guests, I hope, to help out.
Bring your engineering friends next time.
Yeah.
So no, I think that was great interaction on the chat. We see a lot of questions. You guys sparked a lot of great interest with Fiori 3. Obviously, it's very popular with our customers, as you mentioned, and so definitely we will have more insights and more detailed insights into Fiori 3 and the technology side.
And I really love seeing, kind of the people behind the design here, right? Often it always feels prescriptive here. And so Dina and Kara, to know that they're people who are really paying attention to, what people are giving feedback with, how, all the effort that's behind the scenes in order to roll this stuff out for not only our own internal teams, but people who are innovating like Robert. It's great to hear Robert's story in this as well. So thank you so much for joining. This has been great.
Sure.
Yeah.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks.
And so maybe to close up, because we're coming towards the end of the session, next week we will actually focus on how to innovate with SAP Fiori. That will be same time, same place as today. So Tuesday at 8 o'clock Pacific, 11 o'clock Eastern, or 5 p.m. in Central Europe. And if you missed any of the previous Fiori-side chats, you can find them on that tiny URL link with SAP-Fiori-side-chat. You will see all the recordings as well as today's recording once it's actually finished. And if you have any questions, post them in the chat. And otherwise, we see you next week. And again, big thank you to the panelists. Thanks, Kara. Thanks, Dina. Thanks, Robert. And thanks, Tom, for joining us today. And thank you, Keith, obviously, for co-hosting.
Always. Hey, thank you, everyone. Have a great day.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.